Get your ears wrapped around the Golden State Media Concepts Basketball Podcast. All the scoop you need to know, from college basketball to the NBA and even March Madness. News of your rising stars. Topics on and off the hardwood. This is the Golden State Media Concepts Basketball Podcast.
Welcome to the GSMC Basketball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. As always, I'm your host, Nick Robin, and we finally made it here, the NBA Finals. The Lakers, the Miami Heat, one team that I think a lot of us believed were going to be there. The other team, not so much. And after 2+ months of action, we're finally here. And the play that we have seen in the 2+ months that the NBA has been in the bubble has been unbelievable. Let's just go back and look at some of these great moments, not just in the playoffs, but the seeding games as well. We saw the Suns go 8-0, including an unbelievable game-winning jumper by Devin Booker against the Clippers over Paul George and Kawhi Leonard, two of the best perimeter defenders in the NBA. In terms of the playoffs, we saw Donovan Mitchell get off to a hot start in Game 1 with 57 points. Again, that marks third all-time. We saw Luka Doncic in Dallas taking the Clippers to 6 games, including a game-winning 3 in OT from Doncic in Game 4. We saw the emergence and rise of Jamal Murray, the Nuggets, coming back from not one, but 2 3-1 deficits, becoming the first team to ever do that. We saw the Bucks upset by Jimmy Butler and the Heat in the second round, right before Giannis was named MVP for a second consecutive year. We saw Toronto, the defending champs, without their best player in Kawhi Leonard, taking the Celtics to a Game 7 in the second round. We saw Tyler Herro's impressive performance throughout the playoffs at only 20 years old, and then the utter dominance of our two finals teams, both with identical records of 12-3. It has been an exciting NBA restart, and it's going to just continue to get better with the Heat and the Lakers facing off tonight in Game 1 of the 2020 NBA Finals, the only NBA Finals that you'll ever see played in September and in October. On today's show, Jimmy Butler deserves our respect. Doc Rivers is out of LA. And on Nick's picks, I can't believe that just happened moments in NBA history. But first, a look at my most recent hot take. And I tweeted this right before I began recording. Let me pull up my Twitter here. And if you haven't yet, follow me at Nick's Picks 5. That's NICKPICKS 5. Nick's Picks 5. And, quote, crazy thought, but what if LeBron retired after winning the finals? With 4 titles, the only superstar players with more: Kareem, MJ, Magic, Kobe, and Russell. He'd be the third player to walk away after winning a title, in parentheses, Russell and MJ. Even if he wins 6 titles, will he be the GOAT? And then on a thread, the Lakers team beside AD and Kuz are on the wrong side of 30 and have limited cap space, plus AD could still jump to Chicago. LeBron continues to build his media empire, and just maybe we see him running for office in 2024. Doubtful any of this happens, but who knows? End tweet. So that is my hot take for you guys today. If the Lakers go on to win this title, what if LeBron just walked away into the sunset and retired? And I built up some sort of argument, although, to be honest, I don't really think this is going to happen. But crazier things have happened. So let's look at the reasons why he could retire. Like I just mentioned, the opportunity to walk away on top. The only superstar players to do so, Bill Russell in 69, Michael Jordan in 98. But Jordan ended up coming back, playing for the Wizards, something that most Hoops fans want to just forget. And then the 4 titles. What would that mean for LeBron? If he got to 4 titles, that puts him in exclusive company. The only superstars with more titles than LeBron's 4, if he was to win this upcoming finals, Kareem with 6, MJ with 6, Magic with 5, Kobe with 5, and Russell with the 11 in 13 years. I don't usually like to point out Bill Russell's 11 titles because, yes, he went out, he won the titles, but he was only going against 8, maybe 12 teams in the league most of those years. It's not really fair competition comparing it to today's era where you're going up against 29 other teams, all heavily talented, and the game has just grown so much than where it was in even 69 when Bill Russell retired. Now let's look at the Lakers' current team situation. And as I mentioned in the tweet, and I will add one more name to that, Anthony Davis, Kuz, and KCP, Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, are the only players still in the prime or have not even yet reached the prime of their careers. The rest of the roster is on the wrong side of 30. Rondo, 34. JaVale McGee, 32. Howard, 35. Danny Green, 33. And LeBron, although he has continued to play at a high level, will be 36 come this December. And then looking at the Anthony Davis situation, all signs have pointed that he's going to sign in LA, but until there's pen to paper, AD could still flee in free agency. Chicago, his hometown, where he played high school basketball, has been a rumor. And with new coach Billy Donovan, I'm guessing him and management have planned some sort of pitch to get Anthony Davis in a Bulls uniform next year. Again, do not see that happening, but you never know when things have not yet been signed. And then looking at the following players that have player options going into next season: Davis, KCP, Avery Bradley, JaVale McGee, and Rondo. If they win the title, all these players are going to more likely ask for more money. They're going to opt out of their contract and get more money because when you win a title, everyone wants to get paid more. It is the disease of more, and that is usually what makes it so hard for teams to repeat, because everybody, when you win, you just want more. You want more money, you want more publicity, this and that. It's just so many different variables. The secret of basketball has nothing really to do with basketball. And then, even if these players' options hold, they'll still be $10 million over the cap. And that doesn't include re-signing AD, because if anything, AD will not opt into this player option. He is going to want more money. He's going to want that max contract. So the chance of the Lakers bringing all these players back looks very unlikely. You can't just look at the Lakers. You got to look at the rest of the league. They're just going to be deeper next year. Brooklyn Nets, Golden State Warriors, they should be healthy. Kyrie and KD will finally see what they can do in Brooklyn. The Golden State Warriors have Steph Curry, Klay Thompson coming back. They still have Draymond Green. They have the number 2 overall pick in this year's draft. They have Andrew Wiggins, who is still only 25 years old, still has a lot of room to grow, and could be a X factor on this Warriors team. The Mavericks and Nuggets are going to continue to build off their postseason success. And yes, they did get bounced from a 3-1 lead. The Clippers are still around. And it looks like they're going to be getting a new coach. More about that later on in today's podcast. So those are the reasons why LeBron could potentially retire. The opportunity to walk away on top. 4 titles already puts him in exclusive company. The Lakers' current team situation, and again, the league continues to just get deeper and deeper for the Lakers, who will not be the automatic favorites to repeat come next year. So I gave you the reasons why he may retire. Let's look at the other side of the coin, why he would not retire, and that is more likely going to happen. Again, just a crazy thought I threw out there on Twitter today. Wanted to see what people thought, and it's always fun to look at these kind of situations. The biggest part is he still has 2 years left on his contract. That's about $80 million. I don't see him walking away from $80 million to play a sport that he's still playing at a very high level. And then this is a big part. He's talked about wanting to play with his son, LeBron James Jr., who's going to be a sophomore this year in high school. He's talked about this now for a while, ever since October of 2017 in a GQ profile. And I think this opportunity to do something that has never been done with a son and father playing in the NBA at the same time, trying to do that Ken Griffey Jr. and Sr. impersonation, I don't think LeBron would walk away from that. But let me look a little bit deeper. Yes, LeBron James Jr., he's a good player. He's ranked 24th right now on the ESPN recruiting. But is he going to make the NBA? Is he good enough to get to that level? He played spotty minutes last year for one of the best high school teams in the country. But if you're trying to make the NBA, you got to be starting when you're a freshman. I guess that's not always the situation, and you see how players develop over time. Steph Curry wasn't a highly rated prospect coming out of high school. Neither was Jimmy Butler, who probably has one of the most interesting backstories in recent NBA history. More on that again in the next segment. I'm not sure if LeBron James Jr. is good enough to play at the NBA level. Again, the guy is only 15 years old. He has a lot of room to grow as a player. So we'll see what happens there. And then the reason, most importantly, why he won't retire is LeBron James wants to be the GOAT, the greatest of all time. He's spoken about it on several occasions, especially over the last couple of years. Remember the SI article? He's chasing a ghost in Chicago in reference to Michael Jordan. The guy is still uber motivated to become the greatest player of all time. And he's not going to do that by retiring after this season with only 4 titles to his name. What does LeBron have to do to be the GOAT? I think he needs at least 20 years of basketball excellence. He is already at 17. A minimum of 5 titles. So 1 more if he wins this year. But to put him over the edge, I think he needs to get a three-peat. To get him to 6 titles, tied with Michael Jordan, tied with Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. And then the overall durability, I think, sends him over Michael Jordan. I believe, though, he also needs to finish as all-time leader in points, passing Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, and then finish within the top 5 all-time in assists. Looking at the numbers today, if he averages 500 assists over the next 4 years, that's 2,000. That will put him to number 3 on the list, ahead of Steve Nash and right behind John Stockton and Jason Kidd. However, overall, MJ's unblemished record is hard to beat. LeBron will never be undefeated in the finals, as he's already lost 6 times. That 6-0 just looks, it's perfection. When Michael Jordan got to the finals, the biggest stage in basketball, he did not lose. He was never even forced to a Game 7, something that LeBron, unfortunately, cannot erase from his past. However, he does, as of now, have the 10 finals appearances. And if he can get back there in the next year or 2, or in both years, he'll be tied for the most finals appearances with Bill Russell. The only other players to reach the 10 that he's at right now, again, are Russell, Sam Jones with 11, who is part of that Celtics dynasty in the 60s, and then Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, who he's now tied with for 10 appearances. So LeBron is already in exclusive company in several different categories involving the finals. But if he wants to be the GOAT, he needs to get to 6. I don't think 5's going to cut it because, again, he has all the losses and MJ has perfection on his side. Now, let's go back to the second part of my tweet about the business aspirations and the potential opportunity to run for president in 2024. I know that sounds crazy, but with everything going on outside the world of basketball, LeBron really cares about the plight of black people in America. He's spoken out constantly throughout the bubble, and he wants to see change. He wants to be the Muhammad Ali, the Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, the civil rights activist, athlete of his generation. And what better way to do that, to make a change, than to run for office? Again, crazier things have happened, hence our most recent president-elect from 2016. Now, the business aspirations. LeBron wants to own an NBA team, and by retiring, this will allow him to focus on his businesses. Most recently, in March, right before the pandemic, Spring Hill Co., his main business, hit $100 million in investment. And this Spring Hill Co. is comprised of two other companies, Spring Hill Entertainment and the Uninterrupted LLC. Maybe LeBron would like to become more involved and continue to build his business skills while he runs for the 2024 presidency. Again, crazier things have happened. But in the meantime, let's enjoy this finals that we are about to see. The Lakers, LeBron, AD, Dwight Howard, Rondo against the Heat, LeBron's former team with Jimmy Butler, Bam Adebayo, Goran Dragic, the other Splash Brothers with Tyler Hero and Duncan Robinson. It's going to be exciting, and Game 1 is up tonight. After this commercial break, I'm going to tell you why Jimmy Butler deserves our respect. That and more after these messages from our sponsors.
Listen up, sports bettors. This is your man Bryce here to tell you about my favorite sports book, and that's BetUS. Football, basketball, and baseball are all back, and that means it's time to get down your bets. I only endorse one sports book, and that is BetUS.com. Why, you ask? BetUS is the pioneer in online betting with more than 25 years in the biz. You need a sports with integrity and longevity, and you need to know that you're going to get paid. You need a sports book that offers everything, including live betting, MMA, golf, horses, esports, entertainment, and all kinds of crazy prop bets and futures. Nobody in the industry gives bigger bonuses than BetUS. Go to BetUS.com now and fill out your information. It only takes a minute. When you get to the How Did You Hear About Us box, type in my name Bryce or GSMC Basketball Podcast, and you can get up to 150% in bonuses on your first deposit. Nobody beats that. I bet at BetUS, and so should you. Join BetUS today. And don't forget to type in my name or the show name, GSMC Basketball, to get up to 150% bonus on your first deposit. That's BetUS.com.
Are you looking for the very best NFL and college football podcast? Then check out the GSMC Football Podcast. Get the latest football news both on and off the field. From the NFL Draft to trades to the rumor mill to the NFL Combines, they got you covered. That's GSMCpodcast.com/football-podcast. Get updates on college rivalries, game day insights, and much, much more. It's football talk the way you want it. This show eats, sleeps, and breathes football. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
So we just got done talking about my crazy hot take that LeBron is going to retire after this finals. I gave you the reasons why not, and I think we can both leave this conversation assured that LeBron is going to be back with the Lakers next year. He's still got 2 years left on his contract. And if they win the finals this year, where they are the heavy favorites, he's going to want to try and come back and repeat, get that 5th title, get him one title closer to Michael Jordan. But now we're going to talk about the other star on the other team, the Miami Heat, Jimmy Butler, who has had a crazy ride to the NBA. His life story should be, at this point, turned into a movie because it is just crazy the type of life he has lived. Here's a quote from an NBA general manager right before the 2011 draft. His story is one of the most remarkable I've seen in all my years of basketball. There were so many times in his life where he was set up to fail. Every time he overcame just enormous odds. When you talk to him and he's hesitant to talk about his life, you just have this feeling that this kid has greatness in him. End quote. Let's go to Jimmy's early childhood. He was born in Houston, Texas. His father abandoned him and the family when he was just an infant. And then at age 13, his mother kicked him out of the house. And as Butler remembered it in a 2011 interview, she told him, quote, "I don't like the look of you. You gotta go. Your own mother, the one who gave you birth, brought you into this earth, doesn't like the look of your face and doesn't want you to live with her anymore. That is just despicable." And the crazy part is that Jimmy Butler supposedly is still very close with his mother and father. And at the end of the day, he's like, these are the people that brought me into this world, and there's just love between us. That is commendable about how forgiving Jimmy Butler is. After his mother kicked him out, he bounced between homes of various friends, staying for a few weeks at a time before moving on to another house. And it's not just the hard home life that separates Jimmy Butler from so many NBA stars. It's the fact that he wasn't even that highly recruited of a basketball player. So let's look at the high school years. As a junior at Tomball High, Butler averaged 10 points a game. 10 points a game. Solid, but not going to get you any looks from major colleges or universities. So the next year as a senior and team captain, Butler stepped his game out, averaging nearly 20 a game along with 8.7 rebounds. But still, he was not heavily recruited out of high school and chose to attend a junior college in Tyler, Texas. At the junior college, he played pretty well his first year, but was still only considered a 2-star recruit. A 2-star recruit out of 5 stars by 24/7 Sports. He was only listed as the 127th best junior college prospect in the class of 2008. So again, still not getting his dues, but he kept on putting in the work, kept on putting on the work. And that's what we have to respect about a guy like Jimmy Butler. He attended Marquette University. He started his junior and senior year. And all he got, although he played pretty well, averaging 14 and 15 points in back-to-back years, was all Big East honorable mention. And that's great and all, but that's just for your conference alone. So he didn't make second team or first team, but he got honorable mention. So even with that, he gets drafted 30th overall, the last pick in the first round, and in the rookie year plays limited minutes. And then in 2013-14, he averages a career-high 38.7 minutes per game. That ranks first in the NBA. He continues to improve and improve year after year, and although he's counted out several times in his career, he just continues to work hard, and you got to respect a guy like Jimmy Butler, a guy who has put in the work over and over again, and it's a tremendous story. The next year, 2014-15, he makes his first All-Star appearance as a reserve and wins Most Improved Player of the Year. Over the course of a 7-8 year span, we see a guy who is not sought after much at all in high school, go to a junior college, bust his ass there, get to Marquette, plays 3 years there, gets drafted to the NBA, and ends up making an all-star appearance. I mean, if you look at it that way, you're one of the top 24 players in the league. Tell me that's not a movie you would want to watch. This could definitely be a Disney movie. I can already see it in the making, the next Rookie. Now let's go into Jimmy Butler's track record. And in his time in Chicago, they made the playoffs a couple times. Moving on to Minnesota, he helped break a 13-year playoff drought. In the 17-18 season, he helped lead the Minnesota Timberwolves to the playoffs. They were bounced in the first round by, of course, the Golden State Warriors, who dominated that 5-year span in the NBA from 2015 to 2019 last season. Last year, he led the Sixers to a Game 7 in the second round versus the Raptors, and we all know what happened there. Kawhi Leonard hits the 4-bounce shot, and the Raptors move on. They win the finals. Imagine if Kawhi doesn't hit that shot, they go into OT. Butler, who was the only go-to scorer for the 76ers in that fourth quarter and nearly the entire game, this guy is just not afraid of the big moment. He has irrational confidence, which at times can hurt you, but in the case of Jimmy Butler, it's only helped him get better year after year after year. And he's been known as someone who was a locker room cancer in the past. There were the reports in Minnesota that he didn't get along with the youngsters, Karl Anthony Towns and Andrew Wiggins. And there were similar issues in Chicago and even with the 76ers. Tyus Jones came out on a tweet recently saying that's all BS, coming from people who aren't actually in the locker room. If you look at the situation of these three teams that Jimmy Butler no longer on, the Bulls are under new leadership. Minnesota is up for sale, and the 76ers are now in search of a new head coach. So I think in the end, Jimmy Butler has the last laugh. Now let's look at this impressive finals run. And what makes it so impressive is, first off, look at all the players in this era that don't have a finals appearance, and Jimmy Butler now does. And this is a guy who I think most people wouldn't have considered a superstar, but the fact that he, I wouldn't say single-handedly brought this Heat team to the finals, but he is the engine of this team. He is the backbone. He is the toughest player on the court for them every night. And yes, there are a couple factors that helped get this team to the finals. We'll get into that in a second, but look at these players that don't have a finals appearance. And again, Jimmy Butler, as of tomorrow, will. Chris Paul, the best point guard of the last 25 years, the best point guard since Steve Nash and John Stockton. No finals appearance. James Harden, nada. Vince Carter, yes, he's not a part of this era. He was still an active player up until a couple months ago. Played 22 years in the NBA. No finals appearance to show for it. LaMarcus Aldridge, Carmelo Anthony, Russell Westbrook, Paul Millsap, Marc Gasol, Damian Lillard, Paul George. And the gutsy move by Butler to sign with the Heat over several other better contenders. The Heat were a non-playoff team last year. They finished 39-43. And after the season, Dwayne Wade, the head honcho, the iconic franchise leader, retires. Josh Richardson, their leading scorer from last season, traded to Philadelphia. And Bam Adebayo had not yet come into himself. Last year, he averaged only 23.3 minutes per game. He was efficient in those minutes, but he wasn't the player that we see today that has helped lead this team to the finals. Dion Waiters, one of their rotational guys from last year, had a panic attack on a flight this year and was released. Justice Winslow, one of their better rotational players and one of my favorite underappreciated guys in the NBA, can guard multiple positions, can play kind of a point forward. I would say he is like a 20% of what LeBron is. He has a similar game, a spotty shooter at times, but very athletic. He was hurt most of this year and was eventually traded to Memphis. But yes, there is some good fortune as well for this team. The emergence of Bam Adebayo as an all-star performer, making the all-star team along with Butler. Duncan Robinson becoming a lights-out shooter, shot 44.7%. That's better than Steph Curry shot last year. And then, yes, there's a strong rookie performances by Kendrick Nunn and Tyler Hero, averaging 15.3 and 13.5 points per game, respectively, from the two. And then the midseason acquisitions of Jay Crowder and Andre Iguodala. So, yes, Jimmy Butler got some help along the way, but it all begins and ends with Butler. And Look at what he put through despite the adversity from what I mentioned earlier. Put up a tremendous season. Averaged nearly 20 points a game, 6.7 rebounds, 6 assists, and 1.8 steals. He made the All-NBA third team. I think he should have been in there for the second team. He was the best player on a team. Yes, Bam Adebayo is great, but no one expected that from him. But Jimmy Butler came to this situation. He believed in what Pat Riley told him. And that's the thing about this Heat team and Pat Riley. Pat Riley, similar to the Ravens in the NFL or the Pittsburgh Steelers, they have a player type that they're looking for in the guys they bring in. They want the guys who are the first in the gym, the last to leave, and that's what this Heat team is built around. They have strong, tough-minded players. Bam Adebayo, Duncan Robinson, Tyler Hero, Goran Dragic, who we haven't even spoken about yet, that leads this team in scoring through their playoff run at over 20 a game. Guys like Jay Crowder, Andre Iguodala, they are all cut from the same cloth and highly competitive. And that's the thing with Pat Riley, and Michael Jordan said it best in his Hall of Fame speech. Pat Riley is competitive, if not more competitive, than the greatest player of all time, the GOAT, Michael Jordan. And that's what he wanted to bring in for his team. And Jimmy Butler was the man he wanted to lead this team. And he got it right this time, as they are about to appear in their 6th NBA Finals since 2000. That's tied for the second most with the San Antonio Spurs and trails the Lakers by just one Finals appearance. And the best part about all this is Jimmy didn't need to bring in a friend to help. Look at all the NBA duos, both old and new. Paul George and Kawhi Leonard, Russell Westbrook and James Harden, LeBron James and Anthony Davis, who they'll be seeing tonight, Joel Embiid and Ben Simmons, Giannis Antetokounmpo and Chris Middleton, Nikola Jokic and Jamal Murray, Rudy Gobert, Donovan Mitchell, Luka Doncic, and Kristaps Porzingis. And Jimmy Butler has done this all alone. He didn't need to bring in a friend. He didn't need to call up Paul George. Didn't try bringing Damian Lillard or another superstar with them. He came to Miami. He had a plan. They are now in the finals. And whether or not they have a chance against this Lakers team, we're about to find out. After this break, we're going to talk about the recent Doc Rivers firing and what is next for the Clippers organization, and whether bringing in a new coach will get them over the playoff hump. Stay tuned for that after this commercial break.
Check out the show that's built on the MMA. From the UFC to extreme cage fighting, they got the fights covered. Check out the GSMC MMA podcast. Get the latest news on past or upcoming fights. Join us as we talk to and about some of the biggest names in the MMA, past, present, and future. When it's the fight game, there's just one show to check out. GSMCpodcast.com/MMA-podcast. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
Welcome back to the GSMC Basketball Podcast. Thanks for sticking with us today. We just got done talking about Jimmy Butler, why he deserves our respect, the amazing journey he went through to get to the NBA, and remarkable, should be turned into a Disney movie. Moving on to one of the biggest shit shows in the NBA, and unfortunately it's the LA Clippers, who I have a very soft spot for the LA Clippers in my life. First off, they gave me my first job in sports, was a game night staff for them for about 3-4 months, went on to be an inside sales executive. And for those that don't know what an inside sales executive does, you make 80 to 100 phone calls a day to people who have only been to maybe 1 or 2 games in the last 3 to 4 years, and you're expected to sell them a minimum of 10 games, hopefully 22. It's a lot of rejection. You got to have some tough skin for that. Thank you to the Clippers for giving me my first job in sports. And personally, I look at myself as a Clippers fan because I think being a Lakers fan is just so cliche and just basic. I mean, everyone's a Lakers fan because who's not going to be a fan of a team that's won 16 titles? I am from San Diego, and the Clippers were in San Diego before they went to LA, if not for their greedy owner, Donald Sterling. There's a lot of things we can say about him. He actually took the team from San Diego to LA overnight without the league's permission. Imagine if that happened today. Twitter would have a frenzy. Go Clippers. And unfortunately, we have some bad news in Clipperland today. On Monday, after 7 seasons with the Clippers, Doc Rivers has stepped down as the head coach. It was called a mutual decision by him and owner Steve Ballmer. And with Doc gone, that's the final leftover piece from the Lob City era, the most successful era in Clippers history. And Doc is by far the most successful coach in the history of the team. Just look at this. He's the franchise all-time leader in regular season games won with 307, playoff games coached with 46, and playoff games won with 22. Before Rivers arrived, they had only had one 50-plus win season in team history, and that was the year before with Vinny Del Negro. He was fired because they thought they needed to bring in a new coach that would lead them to the promised land. And Rivers, in 4 of his 7 years, had at least 50 wins, plus a franchise record 57 wins in his first season, 2013 to 2014. It didn't get much better than that, as the team was unable to get over the postseason hump. But again, Rivers also accounts for 6 out of the 12 playoff berths in franchise history. Rivers, he may no longer be the head coach of the Clippers, but he has been by far the most successful in what is probably one of the hardest coaching jobs in sports. I would say more so to the fact that you were working with Donald Sterling, who is by far one of the worst owners in not just the NBA, but in the history of sports. We all know what happened in 2015, but what you may not know, and this is an interesting fact, is that in 1979, Jerry Buss offered Donald Sterling one of his real estate properties or something of that nature, and with that money, he was able to purchase the Los Angeles Lakers. So the whole reason the Buss family owns the Lakers is in due part to Donald Sterling. Very interesting. Ballmer, before the mutual agreement to part ways, consulted West and superstar players Kawhi Leonard and Paul George, but nevertheless, it was Ballmer who made the final decision. I believe that Leonard and George were probably on the side that Rivers should stay as the head coach, because not everything can fall upon Doc Rivers. We'll get into that in a little bit, but let's look at Doc's postseason and overall team failures. So even with one of the most talented rosters in the league, with players such as Chris Paul, DeAndre Jordan, Blake Griffin, role players such as Jamal Crawford, Lou Williams, Josh Smith, the Clippers never won more than 57 games in the regular season. They were never the number 1 seed in the West, and before this year, they had only finished better than third, as they finished second this year in the shortened season due to COVID. And most importantly, they never made a conference finals, and in the history of the Clippers, in both LA, San Diego, as well as the Buffalo Braves, it has now been 50 years. 50 years they have not made a conference finals. And in all, Rivers won just 3 playoff series in 7 years. And now we're going to get into the bad of the bad, and that is the 2-3-1 series leads that he blew in 2015 to the Rockets and in 2020 to the Nuggets, as we just saw a couple weeks ago. And it got bad in that Nuggets series as the team blew 3 consecutive double-digit leads in the second half. 3 consecutive double-digit leads in the second half. If they had just held on to one of those leads, they'd be in the conference finals against the Lakers. And I think a lot of people, as good as the Lakers have been all year, they did not perform at their highest level when they played the Clippers. That series could have gone at least 6 or 7 games, and maybe we're seeing the Clippers in the finals right now instead of the LA Lakers. Parting ways with Doc Rivers really going to change all the problems that we have seen with this team this past season. And let's look at those a little bit. Because a lot of these problems are not Doc Rivers' fault. There's a lack of chemistry and leadership that we've seen all season long. A lot of that can be due to the minimal time together for Leonard and George, who are both coming back from injuries. And in the games when they did play together, they had over a 70% winning percentage. I think another season, and although Doc has been with the team for 7 years, I think he needed another season under his belt with the new team that he has brought in. The year before, he won 48 games with a team that he had put together over the last several years. This year, he did win 49 games in a shortened season, with either Kawhi Leonard or Paul George missing several games at a time. I think with another year, he would have been able to better mesh together these two players, especially Paul George, who, again, was out for significant periods of times with injuries. So I don't think all the fault can go on Doc Rivers. And then you look at the bubble and COVID problems that they faced. Patrick Beverley, Montrezl Harrell, and Lou Williams missed significant time due to deaths of the family or friends while outside the bubble. Zubac and Landry Shamet were late in arriving after contracting COVID-19. And Beverley missed all but one game in the first round of Dallas. So there's a lot of team chemistry issues that you can't put all on Doc. But at the same time, when you're up 3-1 in a series and all you need is one victory in 3 games to get yourself to your first conference finals, you have to be able to will your team, motivate your team to get to that next level. And it's kind of hard to coach a team where your 2 best players, Paul George and Kawhi Leonard, for the most part, are pretty reserved superstars, especially Kawhi Leonard. We don't need to go into that, as we know how introverted he can be. What I'm saying here is bringing in another coach, whether it be Tyronn Lue or Sam Cassell, or they bring in someone from the outside, really going to help this team that much more than Doc Rivers, who is one of the better coaches in the league. And yes, I'm going to say he's a little overrated. To his credit, he did win a championship in 2008 with the Celtics. That was a stacked team. Ray Allen, Kevin Garnett, teaming up with Paul Pierce. So yes, he has the one championship, but outside of that has not had much postseason success. We can look at not just the 2-3-1 leads he blew with the Clippers, he also has a 3-1 lead he blew while coaching Orlando. Again, will bringing in a new coach really have a difference on this team? Who knows right now? Nonetheless, Doc Rivers will have a lasting legacy from his time as head coach of the LA Clippers. He brought credibility to the franchise that had never had any before with his arrival in 2013. He led the franchise and the entire league through the scandal over former owner Donald Sterling's racist remarks in 2014. And most recently, Chris Paul, the NBA Players Association president, appointed Doc Rivers to address the league's players as recently as August 26 when the NBA paused to grapple with social justice issues. So despite the fact that he never got this team to the top of the mountain, I think his time in LA will be looked upon fondly. I hope this is not the last time we see Doc Rivers as a coach in the NBA, because I think he still has so much to offer a team, especially a I think a team such as the 76ers, who are really in need of a new head coach and a new mindset, I think that's the type of team that would fit Doc Rivers' coaching style, as he's already been a coach in that division and on the East Coast in the past. And I think it'll be exciting to see what he can do with a team with a lot of talent with Joel Embiid, Ben Simmons, and whether or not they can coexist. And what might be the most ironic part about this whole Doc Rivers firing / stepping down from the LA Clippers is that recently Netflix came out, I think literally a week ago, came out with a new documentary series called The Playbook on the most inspirational coaches in sports. And for basketball, Doc Rivers was a coach that they had the bio about. So a little ironic that he is no longer employed by an NBA team. Doesn't take anything away from the documentary. Well, maybe just a little bit. But yeah, if you haven't seen that yet, I'd say go check it out. Great inside look on what it's like to be a coach in the NBA. Now, moving on, after this commercial break, we are on to Nick's picks. And on today's segment, the most did that really just happen moments in NBA history, including some moments that just recently happened. So stay tuned for this after this break.
Check out the show built around the women of MMA. From the UFC to the extreme cage fighting, we got the fights covered.
Listen.
It's the Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast. The latest news of upcoming fights, discussions of previous matches. Join us as we talk to and about the biggest names in women's mixed martial arts, past, present, and future. When it's the women's fight game, you know where to listen to. The Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast.
Welcome back to the show. We just discussed the recent firing of Doc Rivers, how really it wasn't his fault in how the Clippers season ended, and whether or not anything's going to change by bringing in a new coach. But moving on, and how we end most of our episodes, it is Nick's Picks, where I come up with different lists regarding basketball, typically the NBA, anywhere from who the 5 greatest players are of all time, to who had the best afro, to most outlandish moments in NBA history. And that's what we're talking about today. To did that really just happen moments. And there's so many to go through. And that's the hardest part about this segment, is I have to go back and search all these different moments, players, feats, and accomplishments throughout the history, the 74-year history of the NBA. Imagine if we were doing baseball, I'd have to go back 140 years of baseball history. So luckily, the NBA is a little bit more than half of that. And there's so many great, not great, I would say, but did that really just happen moments in NBA history? Here's a couple ones that didn't make the list. LeBron James leaving Cleveland. The guy's having a TV show. We think he's gonna stay in Cleveland. Like, is this guy really gonna go on national television and stab the team in the back the way he did? Well, he did. Then Kobe Bryant rape case, one of the best players in the NBA, in the midst of going after a 4-peat, flying back and forth between Colorado and LA as part of the case that he ended up settling outside of court. MJ's first retirement, after coming off a 3-peat at the top of his game, Michael Jordan deciding to retire. No one saw that coming. And the most crazy part is he went and played professional baseball. The 2004 Olympic team winning bronze. Eventually, the rest of the world had to catch up, but bronze, third place, not even the championship game. And then the entire 1998-99 season that started in mid-February due to a lockout and saw the number 8 seeded Knicks and still the only number 8 seed to never make the finals. And then Dennis Rodman's entire career. He has more than a couple moments where you think, did that really just happen? Now, moving on to our top 5. And we're going back to 1999. Latrell Sprewell strangling head coach PJ Carlesimo. Before he came to the Knicks, Sprewell was an NBA player that had a bad attitude and didn't exactly know how to control his aggression and emotions. And seriously, the one thing you never do, and I think you're taught this at a young age, you never attack your head coach. Sprewell was a great scorer, dangerous shooter, and had made 3 All-Star games. So we're talking about one of the better players on your team going after the coach like that. Just makes you want to shake your head. Scary moment for the NBA and really saw the divide between players and coaches. And it all happened on a December 1st day. During a practice, Carlesimo criticizing Sprewell, telling him to make some crisper passes. Well, Latrell didn't like that too much. And he went about by threatening the head coach and telling him to keep distance. And when PJ disobeyed Spree's orders by approaching him, he threw him down and choked the coach for 10 seconds before a teammate managed to break the two up. Coaches and players get into arguments all the time, but you never expect a player or a coach to put their hands on one another. There's been incidents with Bobby Knight in the past, the strangling of a player, and this really represented the beginning of what was a dark period in the NBA post MJ's retirement. In 99, you have this incident. Over the next couple of years, there's the Kobe rape case, there's the Malice at the Palace, there's a divide between players and coaches where I think players got too much, too early, too soon, and it really damaged the NBA for a long period of time. And I don't think we really saw a recovery until the league put in the mandated max contracts, not allowing players to make so much money on their rookie contracts, because I think that made players just lazier when they came into the league already making millions on millions of dollars. That was a smart move by the league to have the rookie maximums that you can make depending on your pick in the draft. Now, moving on to number 4, and we have, which we've spoken about previously on this podcast, 1987, Len Bias dies from a cocaine overdose. So imagine one of the best players in the world, Len Bias, out of University of Maryland, considered to be the next big thing to enter the NBA, was an All-American, and had the athletic ability, physical stature, and the ability to create plays, and was already getting the Michael Jordan comparisons. And somehow those lucky sons of bitches over in Boston fell into the number 2 spot once again. They were going to re-up with Len Bias. They were going to continue to their dynasty. Bias was going to take away minutes from Bird and McHale, who were getting into the latter part of their career. But unfortunately, that didn't happen for the Boston Celtics, Bird and McHale. So after flying to Washington, D.C. for an endorsement ceremony that was set to give him $3 million with Reebok, Bias decided to have a little fun by returning to his alma mater of Maryland. And after a night with some friends, it was reported that Bias took a dose of cocaine at 3 a.m. in his dorm. Let's stop there for a minute. I don't know if you've seen the episode of How I Met Your Mother, but there's an episode that says nothing good happens after 2 a.m., and in this case, nothing good happens after 2 a.m. By 3:30 a.m., he went into convulsions and fell asleep. He would never wake up as he died in his sleep as a result of cardiac arrest from the large dose of cocaine that he had taken only a few hours before. Bias's death would spark an outcry from all aspects of the sporting world and the government, where they would take a strong approach between players and the use of cocaine as a recreational drug. That's the scary thing about cocaine. You can do it plenty of times, but just one bad line, and bam, you're dead. And that's what happened here with Len Bias. It's unfortunate, not just because we were about to witness a tremendous talent in the NBA, but just the fact that a young man at 22 years old lost his life due to one silly mistake after 2 a.m. Next up, in a moment I wish I could have been alive to witness just how the world was feeling at this exact moment. It's 1991. Magic Johnson retires due to contracting the HIV virus. And Magic Johnson was recognized as arguably the greatest point guard to ever play the game. In my opinion, he still is to this day. There has never been a player with his height and ability to see the court the way he did. And the passes, go on YouTube, watch the highlights, are extraordinary. He is a top 5 player in NBA history and is a part of that storied Los Angeles Showtime Lakers of the 1980s. There's no Showtime without Magic. So the year is 1991. He's set to enter his 12th season in the league. And during a physical, it's discovered that Magic is HIV positive. And in a tearful conference on November 7th of 1991, Magic told the world that he had the HIV virus and was going to have to retire. That day, everyone knew someone that was positive. But there were some good moments that came out of this, including Johnson coming back and playing the 1992 All-Star Game. And even though he was retired, he was voted by the fans to play and would go on to win MVP with 25 points, 9 assists, and 5 rebounds. It could be for the fact, though, that players, I don't think, wanted to play too close to him because we were still naive on how HIV was actually transferred. The All-Star Game performance would then buoy him to go play in the 1992 Olympics, where he would join the Dream Team en route to a gold medal. Despite Johnson's career being cut short, I think he has made such a great impact on raising awareness of AIDS and how it has been misconstrued at times that we thought this was only a disease that other people had, when in retrospect, this is someone that anybody could contract. And to this day, Magic Johnson is living healthy, was a part of the Lakers up until last year when he suddenly retired. But yes, Magic Johnson announcing to the world that he was HIV positive, number 3 on my what just happened moments in NBA history. Next up at number 2 is a moment that just happened less than a month ago. And that is when the Bulls stopped dribbling on August 26th, when the Milwaukee Bucks decided to forfeit their game against the Orlando Magic. The Magic would have nothing of that, as they too decided to forfeit the game. And with that, there was a domino effect across not just the NBA, but the entire sports landscape. Games in Major League Baseball, soccer, tennis, everywhere around the world, people were stopping playing sports in light of the social justice issues affecting our country. I think enough has been said about this issue over the last several weeks. I talked about it on a podcast recently, but I don't think we're going to acknowledge how amazing of a moment this was till later down the line, that players stopped playing the sport that they're getting paid millions of dollars to do, to stand up for something more important, which is their humanity. So number 2 on my list, when the Bulls stopped dribbling on August 26th. And now number 1 on my list of what just happened moments in NBA history. And I think it's no surprise here, one of the more gruesome and I think just awful moments in the history of the NBA, and that is the Malice at the Palace. In 2004, the Pistons and the Indiana Pacers were playing a regular season game, November 19th, and The game was nearly over, 45 seconds left in the game when Ben Wallace and Ron Artest got into a shoving match after a hard foul by Artest. Players from both teams began to argue, and while Artest laid sprawled out on the announcer's table, attempting to stay out of the argument, shit hit the fan. And that's probably the biggest mistake by Artest. He shouldn't have been sprawled out on the announcer's table in the first place. Not saying he asked for it by doing that, but that's how the brawl was escalated once a fan decided to throw a beverage onto Artest. Wasn't a good idea. And Ron responded in a way that nobody saw coming. He went into the stands and not only went after a fan, went after the wrong fan. Imagine being at the game, enjoying a regular season basketball game, and you're like, oh, this is so great. And out of nowhere, a 6'7", 230-pound man is coming after you, throwing hands. The Pistons players eventually intervened by separating the fans and players until two Pistons fans decided to try and fight Artest and 6'11" Jermaine O'Neal on the court. Again, not a good idea. The fans were disposed of, and the Pacers were eventually let off the court by a chorus of boos and food thrown at them. The aftermath, Artest received the worst suspension in NBA history, 87 games. Steven Jackson, 30 games. O'Neal, 15 games. And Ben Wallace was handed only 6 games. To this day, we have still never seen anything like the Malice at the Palace, and hopefully that continues. But yes, on November 19th, 2004, it was a scary moment as it not just brought media attention to the NBA, but national media attention. It was on CNN, ABC, all the major news stations were looking at this in a negative light on the NBA and the players that participated in this league. Thankfully, over the years, the league has cleaned up its image, but not without a few bumps along the way. So there you have it, my number one what just happened moment, 2004, Malice at the Palace. Thank you guys again for tuning in. And as always, please help us out. Follow us on Facebook. Follow us on Instagram. Any other social media sites. Listen to the pod. Throw it in a comment because we really appreciate it as we continue to build our brand. Thank you once again. Look forward to seeing you on the next episode of the GSMC Basketball Podcast.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Basketball Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.